What do you do when the man you love strips you of everything, right on your own doorstep? When his family films your humiliation for sport, you think you'd just crumble. You're wrong. They thought I was weak. They thought I was all alone. They forgot about the one phone call I swore I'd never make. My name is Maya Thompson. I am 35 years old, and until about 10 minutes ago, I thought I was just a project manager for a national nonprofit, coming home from a grueling 12-hour day. The gala planning had been a logistical nightmare, and all I wanted was to kick off my heels, pour a glass of wine, and collapse into the life I had built. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime onto our private landing. Ours. That's what I called it. I walked the few steps to apartment 30A, the heavy oak door I loved, and dug the security fob from my purse. I pressed it against the sensor. A sharp, digital beep. The light flashed red. Access denied. I frowned, a flicker of annoyance passing through my exhaustion. I tried it again. Red. I could hear the muffled sound of the television inside. He was home. Leo. I knocked, my knuckles rapping against the solid wood. Honey, the keycard isn't working again. Can you let me in? I waited. A moment later, the lock disengaged with a heavy metallic thud. The door swung open. Leo stood there, my husband of 3 years. His face, the one I had kissed goodbye just this morning, was a blank, cold mask. He wasn't looking at me, he was looking through me. And he wasn't alone. His sister, Jenna, was slouched against the entryway wall, the picture of casual insolence. She was holding her phone up, the camera lens pointed directly at my face. A small red light in the corner of the screen confirmed she was recording. Leo, what is this? I tried to step forward, but he didn't move. Why is Jenna here? What's going on? I've filed for divorce, Maya, Leo said. His voice was flat. The voice he used for telemarketers, for strangers. The air in my lungs turned to ice. My briefcase suddenly felt like it weighed 100 pounds. What are you talking about? We were talking about booking flights to Italy this morning. Jenna let out a low, bored laugh. Oh, tell her the best part. Leo, don't drag it out. This is getting boring. Our life, Leo continued, his eyes as dead as stones, is over. He was holding a thick stack of papers. He didn't hand them to me. He threw them. They struck me square in the chest, the sharp edge of the clipboard stinging through my silk blouse. I fumbled, papers scattering across the marble floor of the landing. I bent, my knees shaking, to pick one up. It was a legal filing, a petition for dissolution. My eyes scanned the jargon, the fog of shock making the words swim, until they landed on a clause near the end. Wife, Maya Thompson, hereby voluntarily waives all rights to marital assets, including property, savings, and investments. My blood ran cold. Leo, this is insane. I flipped to the last page. A signature. It was my name, but it wasn't my handwriting. It was a crude, obvious, insulting forgery. I never signed this, Leo. That is not my signature. What did you do? I tried to push past him, to get into my home, to shake him until my husband reappeared. Leo, stop this. He put his hands on my shoulders, not in comfort, not in love. He shoved me. I stumbled backward, my heel catching on the hall carpet. I nearly fell. I was outside. I was in the hallway. He was in the doorway. Jenna stepped out, moving into my personal space, her phone now just inches from my face. The bright, invasive light of the camera flash blinded me. Finally, she sneered, her voice dripping with a triumph I couldn't comprehend. Got the trash out of the house. God, you look pathetic. She glanced back inside the apartment, spotting my handbag sitting on the antique console table by the door. Oh, she said brightly. Don't forget your bag, sister. She snatched it. For a second, I thought she would just throw it at me. She did something worse. Jenna walked to the ornate iron railing of the hallway, the one that overlooked the building's main lobby 3 floors below. She held the bag up, smiled for her own camera, and then she simply let it go. I watched, numb, as my life tumbled end over end, a slow-motion catastrophe before hitting the polished marble of the lobby with a sickening thwack. My wallet, my keys, my lipstick, all of it exploded across the floor. I turned back to the door, to Leo, my mouth open, but no sound came out. He just looked at me. One last, empty stare. Then he closed the door in my face. Click. The unmistakable final sound of the new security bolt sliding into place. I stood there, alone. I was still in my work clothes, my feet screaming in my pumps. The forged divorce papers were a white mess at my feet. The silence was deafening. Then, I heard it. The faint creak of a door opening. Down the hall, Mrs. Petrov from 30C was peering through a 2-inch crack, her eyes wide with pity and curiosity. The show was over. I was the wreckage. I didn't take the elevator. I couldn't face the mirrored walls. I pushed through the heavy fire door into the stairwell, the sterile concrete amplifying the sound of my own ragged breathing. My hand, still clutching the crumpled, forged divorce papers, slid down the cold steel railing. Each of the 3 flights down was a fresh wave of humiliation, Mrs. Petrov's pitying, curious face, the final, echoing click of the security bolt, Leo's empty eyes, Jenna's laughing, recording phone. I emerged into the cavernous, opulent lobby. It was designed to impress. All polished marble and abstract art, but now it just felt like a freezing, cavernous tomb. My bag. It was 20 feet away, a dark stain on the white floor. My belongings were scattered around it like shrapnel, a silver lipstick case. My company ID, a few loose coins. I walked toward it, feeling the eyes of the night shift concierge, Frank, on my back. I knelt, my knees cracking on the hard stone, and started shoving everything back inside. My wallet, my work phone, my keys that no longer opened any door I owned. Ma'am, Mrs. Vance. I looked up. It was Frank, the head of security, a man who, just last week, had accepted a $100 tip from Leo for keeping the building secure. Frank, thank God. My voice was a hoarse whisper. My husband, Leo, he locked me out. He took my keys. My fob isn't working. Can you please just let me back up or let me use the landline I need to call? Frank shifted his weight, his eyes carefully avoiding mine, focusing instead on a spot just over my shoulder. He stiffened. I'm sorry, Mrs. Vance. I can't get involved in a domestic dispute. A domestic dispute? The words were acid in my mouth. I live here. My name is on the lease. Just let me in my apartment. Mr. Vance was very clear, he said, his voice clipped and professional. He said you might cause a scene. He said any disputes were to be handled legally. This is a private matter. My hands are tied. He shoved me out, Frank. My voice cracked, echoing in the lobby. He threw my bag over the railing. You're the head of security. Do something. I'm sorry, ma'am. He turned his back on me. A firm, uniformed dismissal that screamed, Leo pays me more than you do. I clutched my bag to my chest and pushed through the heavy glass revolving doors. The Denver night hit me like a physical blow. The air was thin and sharp, and the Colorado wind cut straight through my thin silk blouse, raising immediate goosebumps on my arms. I hadn't even grabbed my coat. I pulled out my phone. The screen lit up, weakly. Battery low. 3% remaining. 3%? My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I went to my favorites. Leo. I pressed call. It didn't even ring. A small notification popped up. Call failed. User busy. I tried again. Call failed. I sent a text Leo. This is insane. Let me in. A red exclamation mark. Message failed to send. He hadn't just locked me out. He had erased me, blocked. My stomach clenched so hard I thought I would be sick right there on the pristine sidewalk. I started walking, aimlessly. My heels echoed on the empty downtown pavement. I was a spectacle in my tailored work clothes, now disheveled, a woman with nowhere to go. I saw the blue light of a bus stop shelter half a block down. I needed to get out of the wind. I needed to sit. I huddled onto the hard, freezing metal bench. The city noise seemed distant, cars passing in a blur of red and white lights. I was invisible, a ghost in a well-lit purgatory. And then, the final devastating piece of the puzzle slotted into place. The timing, my savings. Just yesterday. It was just yesterday. Leo had come to me, all smiles and shared dreams, with the final paperwork for the house, the charming Victorian near Wash Park. He'd said the sellers needed the full down payment in the joint escrow account by today. My account. The one I'd kept separate. The inheritance from my mother. It's the last step, Maya, he'd said, kissing my forehead. The last step to our forever. And I, like a trusting, lovesick fool, had logged in and transferred every last cent. My entire safety net. Gone. He hadn't just planned this. He had choreographed it. He waited until my defenses were gone, until my accounts were empty, until I had nothing left but him. And then he cut the rope. 3%. The screen flickered, threatening to die. I opened my contacts. My fingers were numb, clumsy. I scrolled. Friends. Sarah. Emily. Jess faces I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. Leo had always found reasons to dislike them. They're not supportive of us, Maya. She's jealous of you, honey. I had let the distance grow, too tired to fight him on it. I couldn't call them. What would I even say, Mom? Dad. The names still listed, 5 years after the crash. I squeezed my eyes shut, a fresh wave of pain hitting me. I kept scrolling, past acquaintances, past colleagues, past the dry cleaner and the dentist. And then I stopped. One name. A name I hadn't dialed in 5 years. A name I had promised myself I would never, ever contact again. Not after the fight we'd had. Not after I'd chosen Leo over his brutal, pragmatic advice. The contact entry wasn't just a name. It was a note to myself, saved in a moment of anger and youthful arrogance. Julian Croft, only when the world ends. My thumb hovered over the screen. The wind howled, whipping my hair across my face. The screen dimmed, the battery icon flashing a desperate red. It was the end of the world. I pressed call. The phone didn't ring twice. I pressed call, the screen flashed, and on the very first ring, the connection clicked. The line was silent for a fraction of a second, filled only with the sound of my own teeth chattering. Maya. The voice was not a question. It was a statement. A voice so deep, calm, and resonant, it seemed to vibrate with the thermal energy I was lacking. It was the voice of old money, of unshakable confidence, of boardroom decisions that moved markets. It was the voice I had run from. I tried to answer, but what came out was a broken animal sound, a sob that tore from my frozen chest. Julian, I finally managed, my voice a shredded whisper. Julian, your location, he said. It was not a request. It was a command. A bus stop, 17th and Arapahoe, I think, please. 5 minutes. The line went dead. My phone screen, which had held on with that last desperate 3% of life, did not light up again. It was a black, useless rectangle. My call to the void had been answered, and now my only lifeline was a memory. I huddled on the metal bench, the wind a physical predator, tearing at my hair and my thin blouse. I counted the seconds, the passing cars, the cracks in the pavement illuminated by the street lamp. I didn't know if I was counting up or down. I just counted, focusing on the numbers to stop myself from shattering completely. I reached 298, 299, 300. Right on the 300th second, the world went white. Two blinding, high-intensity beams cut through the darkness, so bright they were almost blue. They didn't belong to a taxi or an Uber. They were set high, flanking a massive, glistening chrome grille, a vehicle, a long, black, impossibly clean Mercedes Maybach, glided to a silent stop directly in front of the bus shelter. It was so quiet, it felt like it was violating a law of physics. It didn't drive. It arrived. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. Julian Croft. He was in his 40s, though he looked like he'd been that age for a decade and would remain so for 3 more. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, a crisp white shirt, and no tie. He looked like he had just stepped out of a meeting, not into a rescue mission on a cold city street. He didn't run. He walked, his expensive leather shoes making no sound on the pavement. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't ask if I was hurt. He didn't ask about Leo. His eyes, a sharp, analytical gray, took in my disheveled state, my bare arms, the cheap metal bench, and the darkness around me. It was a scan, an assessment of data. Then, without a word, he unbuttoned his own overcoat. It was black cashmere, long and heavy, and I knew without asking that it was worth several $1,000s. He shrugged it off his broad shoulders and, in one smooth motion, draped it over me. The weight of it was immediate. The warmth. It was like being wrapped in a secure, heated cocoon, and it smelled of cedar and, strangely, of justice. I clutched it around me, the wool soft against my skin, and looked up at him. Julian, Leo. In the car, Maya. His voice was low, cutting through the wind. He didn't help me up. He expected me to stand. I did. He turned and walked to the rear door of the Maybach, opening it. This was my ex. The word felt flimsy. He was not an ex-lover. He was my ex-guardian, the lawyer my father had trusted with everything, the man who managed the Sterling family trust, the fortune I had tried to pretend didn't exist. He was the man I had screamed at in his high-rise office 5 years ago, telling him he was a cold, calculating cynic, that he didn't understand love, that Leo was different. He was the man I had officially, legally, and tearfully fired from my life. I slid into the car. The seat was upholstered in the softest cream leather I had ever felt. The door closed with a muted, heavy thunk, and the entire world outside the wind, the traffic, the humiliation vanished. There was only a profound, warm, luxurious silence. Julian slid in the opposite side. He leaned forward and pressed a button on the center console. "We're leaving," he said to the driver. He turned to me. His face was unreadable in the soft, ambient glow of the cabin. He reached into the console between us. He placed 2 items on the polished wood veneer. The first was a brand-new cell phone, dark and sleek, still in its plastic wrapping. The second was a single, heavy, matte black card. It wasn't plastic. It was metal. An American Express Centurion. "This is mine," Julian said, his voice flat. "As of this moment, it is yours. Your phone is a security risk. This one is clean." He pushed the card across the veneer toward me. "We need to talk." The Maybach didn't just drive to the Four Seasons. It submerged, sliding through the downtown Denver traffic and descending into a private, secured underground garage. We never saw the main lobby. We were met at the elevator bank by 2 men in dark, impeccably tailored suits. They weren't hotel staff. They were Julian's men, and they moved with a quiet, lethal efficiency. They escorted us in a private elevator, one that required a special key, which opened not into a hallway, but directly into the presidential suite. The doors slid open with a soft hydraulic hiss, revealing a 2-story wall of glass that overlooked the entire glittering expanse of the city. The air was warm. The silence was absolute. Sit, Julian said, gesturing to a massive cream-colored sofa. His voice, for the first time, held a trace of something other than calculation. I realized, with a jolt, that it was anger, not at me, but for me. He was already on the new phone he had unwrapped in the car, the one he had given me the twin of. I need a full menu from room service sent up immediately, all of it, and coffee, a thermal carafe. He listened for a second. I don't care what time it is. Do it. He hung up and looked at me. I was still huddled in his cashmere coat, a small, shivering creature lost in an ocean of luxury. You need to eat, then you need to talk. We have a lot of work to do tonight. A private security detail, the same men from the garage, discreetly took up positions by the suite's entrance. A knock came moments later. Not a knock, but a soft tap. Julian signed for a cart laden with food. I found myself staring at a plate of seared salmon, roasted asparagus, and wild rice. My stomach twisted. I can't. You will, he said, not unkindly. You are in shock and your blood sugar is crashing. You cannot plan a war on an empty stomach. Eat, Maya. I picked up the fork. The simple act felt monumental. I took one bite, then another. The warmth spread through my limbs, and with it, the fog of shock began to recede. It was replaced by the first, hot licks of a towering, ice-cold rage. Julian sat in the armchair opposite me, watching me, his gray eyes missing nothing. He waited until I had finished half the plate and drained a full cup of black coffee. I tried to warn you, he said finally. His voice was quiet, but it resonated in the vast, silent room. The day you came to my office, 5 years ago, I told you he was a grifter. You told me I was a cynic, that I couldn't understand love. You fired me. I was in love, I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. No, Julian corrected, leaning forward. You were a target. He didn't marry you, Maya. He acquired you. What are you talking about? He thought I was just me, a project manager. He loved my life. The simplicity. Julian let out a single harsh sound that might have been a laugh. Maya. He didn't know you as Maya Thompson, the non-profit worker. He knew you as Maya Sterling. The name hit me like a physical blow. Sterling. My name. The name I had legally, painstakingly, and expensively buried after my parents died. The name that tied me to one of the largest, quietest tech fortunes on the West Coast. I had run from it, hated it, wanted only to be normal, to be loved for myself. No, I said, shaking my head. That's impossible. No one knows that name. Only you. You were my father's executor. He knew, Julian stated, his voice flat, leaving no room for argument. His consulting firm. It's a data mining operation. He didn't just meet you by chance at that gallery. He targeted you. He spent a year researching you before he ever said hello. He found the legal name change. He found the trust. He knew exactly who you were. The room tilted. The air was thin. His marriage, Julian continued, pressing the advantage, was not about your money. He knew he couldn't touch the trust. Not while I was still breathing, even if you fired me. His goal was more insidious. It was sabotage. He married you to isolate you, to break you down, piece by piece, to make you legally and emotionally compromised. He was positioning himself to have you declared unstable, incapable of managing your own affairs, so he could petition the court to become your guardian and seize control. The humiliation in the hallway, Jenna's camera, the forged signature. It wasn't a messy breakup. It was theater. It was evidence, designed to paint me as the hysterical, unstable wife. This was not a broken heart. This was a hostile takeover. This was not a betrayal. It was a calculated long-term corporate raid on my very identity. The pain was eclipsed by a sudden, profound, clarifying fury. He hadn't just insulted my heart, he had insulted my intelligence. Julian watched me. He saw the tears dry on my face. He saw the shock in my eyes harden into something that matched the steel in his own. "So," he said, standing. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, lacing his hands behind his back as he looked down at the city lights. "I will ask you what you want to do. I can make him disappear. A word, and he and his sister will be buried in so much litigation, so many legal problems, they will never see the light of day. Or I can make them disappear. They will be a bad memory by sunrise. You can go back to your quiet life." I stood up. I walked to the window and stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder. The city lights spread out below us like a carpet of fallen stars. My city, the city where I had been humiliated. "Disappear," I said, my voice low and unfamiliar, a gravelly echo of the woman I had been an hour ago. No, that's too easy. That's an escape. That's what he wanted for himself. I turned my head, my reflection a pale ghost against the dark glass, and met his gaze. He threw me out of my home. He filmed my despair. He left me in the cold with nothing. He wanted me to be invisible, penniless, and broken. I took a deep, steadying breath. The fire was in my chest, a furnace of pure, cold purpose. I don't want him to disappear, Julian. I want him to know exactly what he did. I want him to feel the cold. I want him to feel the panic of a door locking behind him. I want him to have nothing, no money, no reputation, no honor. I want him to be nothing but the dirt on the bottom of my shoe. I want him to taste it. Julian didn't sleep. I don't think he's capable of it in the same way mortals are. While I showered in a bathroom larger than my first apartment, washing away the grime and humiliation of the night, the penthouse suite was transformed. It ceased to be a luxury hotel room and became a war room. His two-man security detail was replaced by a three-person team of forensic accountants and legal analysts. Laptops were open, secure satellite phones were patched in, and a high-speed printer in the corner began, at around 2 a.m., to quietly churn out documents. I emerged in a thick hotel robe, my hair wrapped in a towel, and sat on the sofa. The coffee had been replaced. The food was gone. All that remained was the low, steady hum of quiet, focused work. At 4:15 a.m., Julian, who had been on a conference call in the adjoining bedroom, walked back into the main room. He looked at his team. Report. A woman with a severe haircut and wire-rimmed glasses looked up from her screen. "You were right, Mr. Croft. Vance Consulting is a ghost. It has no clients, no retainers, no work product. It's a shell, registered in Delaware, designed for one purpose: to launder incoming funds and distribute them." "Distribute them where?" I asked, my voice hoarse. The analyst looked at Julian, who nodded. "To him, ma'am, and to his sister, Jenna Vance. Bi-weekly payments of $50,000 to her, and the rest into a series of offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The accounts were opened 6 months ago." I felt sick. But his clients, the presentations he practiced, the dinners, all a performance, Julian said, his voice hard. "Staged for your benefit, to build the illusion of a successful, legitimate businessman. So you wouldn't question the joint accounts. So you wouldn't question the man who was, in his own words, building your future." The words hung in the air, a monument to my own stupidity. "It gets worse," the male analyst said, not looking up from his keyboard. "The shell company was just the setup. The real problem started 90 days ago." Julian picked up a single sheet of paper from the newly printed stack. He held it out to me. "This," he said, "is a personal guarantee. For a short-term, high-interest bridge loan. The principal is for $500,000. My eyes scanned the paper. It was my name, my social security number, and that same, awful, forged signature from the divorce papers. I don't understand." He took out a loan, in your name, Julian said, his voice dangerously quiet. He used your credit, your identity, as collateral, and he didn't stop at one. The first analyst handed me another sheet, and another, and another. They were all the same, bridge loans, payday loans, but for corporations, all from different, shadowy high-risk lenders, all personally guaranteed, with forged signatures, by Maya Thompson. What is the total? I whispered, my blood turning to ice. As of 4 a.m. this morning, the woman said, we have uncovered 4 separate loans. The total principal is $2 million. I dropped the papers. They fluttered to the thick carpet. 2 million. But why? The money I transferred yesterday. It was over 600,000. Why would he need more? Because the money you transferred was his escape fund, Julian said, his voice slicing through the room. The $2 million that was never meant to be paid back. That was the debt he was leaving you. I looked at him, uncomprehending. He was building a narrative. Maya, Julian explained, pacing in front of the window. He drains your private savings. He forges your name on $2 million of unsecured debt. He files for a fraudulent divorce, painting you as unstable. And then, he and his sister board a flight to a non-extradition country, which, our team has just confirmed, is scheduled to leave tomorrow afternoon. My God, the finality of it. He was going to leave, I breathed, and I would be left with nothing. Not nothing, Julian said, stopping his pacing to look directly at me. The full, horrific weight of his genius was in his eyes. You would be left with a $2 million debt, a fraudulent divorce, and a string of criminal charges for bank fraud. The lenders would come for you, not him. Your signature is on the guarantee. He would be on a beach with Jenna, and you would be in a federal prison. The room was silent. Even the analysts had stopped typing. Wait, I said, a new, tiny, practical horror dawning on me. The apartment, the lease, if he was leaving. The wire-rimmed analyst spoke, her voice devoid of emotion. The apartment was leased in your name as well, ma'am. He was listed as a cohabitant, and the rent hasn't been paid for 3 months. An eviction notice was served yesterday afternoon, which Mr. Vance obviously intercepted. He hadn't just thrown me out of our home. It wasn't our home. It was a stage. It was a trap. And the lease, the loans, the divorce. It was all a part of the same, monstrous, meticulously planned financial execution. I looked at Julian, my entire body numb. He walked over and picked up the loan agreement I had dropped. He held it up. You must understand this. Maya, he said, his voice low and intense. He wasn't just kicking you out. He was burying you alive in his ruins. The sun rose at 6:30 a.m. It illuminated a city that was, for me, completely changed. The penthouse was no longer a refuge. It was a fortress. The woman who had cried on the bus stop 12 hours ago, Maya Thompson, was a ghost. She had been murdered by a forged signature and a door slammed in her face. As the analysts and legal team packed their secure equipment, a new team arrived, summoned by Julian with the same silent, terrifying efficiency. They were not lawyers. A woman with a severe black bob and a measuring tape draped around her neck. A man carrying a metal briefcase that I knew, instinctively, did not contain papers, and a woman carrying 3 unmarked black garment bags. You cannot wage a war in a hotel bathrobe, Maya, Julian said, sipping a cup of coffee that had appeared from somewhere. You are no longer Maya Thompson, the victim. That identity is a liability. You will, from this moment, be Maya Sterling. I stood. I let them work. They were a whirlwind. The woman with the measuring tape assessed me with a critical eye. The structure is good, she murmured, more to herself than to me. She's been hiding it. The man with the briefcase, a hairstylist for the 1%, sat me in a chair facing the window. We are not cutting, he announced. "We are sculpting." For 2 hours, I was snipped, tailored, and rebuilt. My sensible shoulder-length brown hair was cut into a sharp, angular bob that grazed my jawline. It was severe, professional, and dangerous. My soft, non-profit manager blouses and comfortable slacks were gone. The woman unzipped the first garment bag. She held up a suit. It was not a women's suit designed to be soft. It was a weapon, crafted from dark navy wool that looked almost black, with a razor-sharp shoulder, a nipped-in waist, and trousers that were designed to be worn with 3-inch heels. Not the 4-inch stilettos of a victim, but the solid, powerful heels of a person in charge. When I emerged from the bedroom, the transformation was absolute. The person in the mirror was not the woman who had begged Frank the security guard for help. This woman would have had Frank fired before he finished his sentence. My face was the same, but the context had changed everything. The armor was on. Julian was waiting for me in the main room, which had been reconfigured. A long table was now at its center, overlooking the city. He nodded once, a brief flicker of approval in his gray eyes. Good. Now, the next step. He slid a tablet across the polished wood. Your legal team filed the initial fraud and forgery complaints with the Denver PD at 6 a.m. They are already seeking an emergency injunction against Leo Vance. But that is defense. We are now moving to offense. He tapped the screen. A corporate logo appeared, Apex Holdings. "This is one of my private equity firms," he said. "It's the umbrella for a number of aggressive acquisitions. As of 7 a.m. this morning, you were appointed to its board. As of 7:01, you were voted in as interim chief executive officer." I stared at him. "CEO Julian, I'm a project manager. I plan galas." "You planned galas," he corrected, his voice sharp. "But Maya Sterling has a 19.8 GPA from Wharton. Maya Sterling interned at 2 of the most ruthless hedge funds in New York before she was 21. Maya Sterling speaks fluent Mandarin and can price a derivatives market in her sleep. You just forgot. You buried the smartest person in the room under a mountain of cardigans." He was right. As I looked at the logo, something in my brain clicked. A long dormant part of me, the part that had been my father's daughter, the part that saw numbers not as figures on a page but as a language of power, began to wake up. I picked up the tablet. I read the overview. I saw the strategy. And, for the first time, I saw the weakness in Leo's plan, not as a wife, but as a predator. "His debt," I said, the words coming to me before I even formed the thought. "The $2 million. It's high risk. The lenders will be jumpy. They'll be looking to sell it off for pennies on the dollar to a collections agency." Julian almost smiled. "Go on." "We don't want to just defend against it," I said, the Sterling brain taking over, cold and fast. "We want to own it. Why let them bury him when we can do it ourselves? Apex Holdings. We buy the debt. We buy all of it. We become his sole creditor." "And then," Julian prompted. "And then," I said, feeling a cold, beautiful clarity. "We call in the marker. We seize his assets. We become the bank. We take everything." "That," Julian said, "is the woman I was waiting for. No one bullies the CEO. Maya. They only try to survive her." He stood. "There is one more thing." A new person had entered the suite while we were talking. A tall, incredibly fit man in his late 40s with the quiet, unsettling stillness of someone who has seen and done things. He wore tactical pants and a simple black t-shirt. "This is Marcus," Julian said. "He is former Special Operations. He will be your driver and your self-defense instructor." I frowned. "Is that really necessary?" "Leo shoved you," Julian said, his voice flat. "He put his hands on you. That will be the last time any man does so without your express permission and his subsequent profound regret. Revenge needs to be mental and financial, but it also needs to be physical. You will learn to stand. You will learn to strike. You will learn to break whatever and whoever gets in your way. Class starts at 5 p.m. The first move came not from us, but from them. It was arrogant, sloppy, and broadcast for the world to see. Just after 7 p.m., the analyst with the wire-rimmed glasses, whose name I'd learned was Rebecca, turned her laptop toward me. "Ms. Sterling, you need to see this." It was an Instagram story, Jenna Vance's public profile. The video was shaky, clearly filmed on her phone. She was back in my apartment, the apartment that was, I now knew, about to be seized for non-payment. She was in my walk-in closet, laughing. "Cleaning out the trash," she announced to her followers, her voice a shrill, nasal victory. She held up one of my favorite cashmere sweaters, a gift from my mother, before tossing it into a black industrial-sized garbage bag. Some things just don't belong in a high-class life. Time for a fresh start. She panned over to at least 5 stuffed full bags, then kicked one. The caption was written in bright pink, cleaning out the remnants' new life. A hot, white-hot flash of rage went through me. It wasn't about the clothes. It was the violation, the public gloating, the sheer, unadulterated scorn. "She's proud," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "She's an idiot," Julian countered, not even looking up from his own phone. "And idiots like to celebrate their victories before the game is over. Rebecca, where are they?" "Tracking their dinner reservation, sir," Rebecca said. "Mr. Vance just used his Amex before the emergency freeze hits the servers. They are at the Capitol Grill, a table for 2. They ordered the Grand Plateau Seafood Tower and a bottle of Dom Perignon." "Of course they did," I said. "They were spending my $600,000. They were toasting their new life." Julian stood and straightened his suit jacket. "Good, they're celebrating. Let's send them a congratulatory gift." He looked at me. A silent question. "Are you ready, Maya?" I stood. The navy blue suit felt like a second skin. "They're celebrating their new life. Julian. It's only polite to show them what it's going to look like." Marcus, my new driver and bodyguard, drove us. We didn't take the Maybach. We took a black understated and clearly armored Range Rover. We arrived at the steakhouse 10 minutes later. The Capitol Grill was the definition of old guard Denver power. Dark wood, brass rails, hushed conversations over $300 bottles of wine. It was a place Leo had always aspired to belong. Julian and I did not wait for the hostess. We simply walked in. The effect was instantaneous. The low hum of conversation in the main dining room faltered. Waiters stopped. Forks paused midway to mouths. We were not just 2 people. We were an event. Julian, with his imposing height and aura of absolute command, and me, the woman in the razor-sharp suit with the dead-cold eyes. We were not here to eat. We were here to hunt. I scanned the room, and there they were, in a plush, red-leather booth in the center of the room, like actors on a stage. Leo was holding his champagne flute up, a wide, smug smile on his face, his other hand covering Jenna's. Jenna was beaming, holding her phone up, probably taking a selfie of their toast. They were the picture of victory. Then, Leo's eyes flicked toward the entrance. His smile froze. The champagne flute slipped. He didn't drop it, but he fumbled, liquid sloshing over his hand. His face, which I had loved, which had faked love for me, went a chalky, sickly white. Jenna, seeing his expression, turned. Her smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure, venomous shock. Leo's fork, the one he'd been using for an oyster, clattered from his limp hand onto his plate. I did not say a word. I did not acknowledge them. I simply started walking, my heels clicking a steady, unhurried rhythm on the hardwood floor. I looked straight ahead, past their booth, toward the back of the restaurant. Julian was half a step behind me. As we drew level with their table, I could feel the heat of their panic. I could smell Jenna's perfume. I walked right past them. As I passed, a third figure, a polite, unremarkable man in a gray suit who had entered just after us, stepped up to their table. He was David, Julian's lead attorney. David placed a thick, heavy stack of documents at least 4 inches thick directly in the center of their seafood tower, crushing a shrimp cocktail. "Mr. Vance, Ms. Vance," David said. His voice was not loud, but it was clear, and it carried. The tables nearby, already silent, leaned in. "You are served. This is a summons from the district court. The charges include, but are not in totality, felony wire fraud, conspiracy, aggravated forgery, and identity theft. This," he added, tapping a smaller separate document on top, "is an emergency judicial order, effective immediately, freezing all known assets pending trial." There was a moment of perfect, stunned silence. Then, Jenna did exactly what I knew she would. She shattered. "You," she shrieked, pointing at me, scrambling out of the booth. "You bitch, you can't do this. You have no money, you're nothing." I had stopped. I turned, slowly. I let the entire restaurant see the cool, bored expression on my face. I looked at Jenna, a creature of pure, frantic noise, and then I glanced at her phone, still clutched in her hand. "Your Instagram video was very interesting, Jenna," I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria. "The one of you in my closet. My legal team was particularly grateful. They call it Exhibit A in the complaint for felony complicity and defamation." Jenna's mouth snapped shut, but I wasn't done. I looked past her, at Leo. He was staring at the top page of the summons, his face not just white, but green. He was shaking. He had seen the name of the primary plaintiff, the name of the entity that had already, in the span of 12 hours, purchased every single dollar of his $2 million fraudulent debt. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a new, dawning, existential terror. He had not been sued by a bank. He had not been sued by Maya Thompson. He had been sued by Apex Holdings. I gave him a small, cold smile, the smile of a CEO. Then I turned, and Julian and I walked out of the restaurant, leaving them to pay the check. The performance at the restaurant was not the final act, it was the overture. The true war was silent, digital, and waged in the hours that civilized people slept. While Leo and Jenna were experiencing the first cold shocks of their credit cards being declined, Julian and I were in the penthouse war room, executing the plan I had formed hours earlier. My strategy was simple. Leo saw me as a wife to be defrauded. I would reintroduce myself as his creditor. Apex Holdings did not sue. Suing is slow, it is public, and it implies a negotiation. We did not negotiate. We acquired. The high-risk lenders who had so gleefully handed over $2 million on my forged signature were not, as Julian had pointed out, in the business of loyalty. They were in the business of cutting losses. When Julian's legal team contacted them, not with a threat, but with an offer, they folded instantly. At 8:05 p.m., as Leo and Jenna were likely arguing with the steakhouse manager, a subsidiary of Apex Holdings purchased the first $500,000 debt for 30 cents on the dollar. By midnight, we owned all 4 loans. At 9 a.m. the next morning, Maya Thompson was just a name on a few fraudulent police reports. But Maya Sterling, CEO of Apex Holdings, was now the sole legal owner of Leo Vance's entire $2 million debt. He owed me everything. At 9:01 a.m., a process server, flanked by 2 of Julian's security men, hand-delivered a single heavy envelope to the concierge of the apartment building. A second, digital copy was sent to Leo's last known email. It was not a lawsuit. It was an acceleration notice. A demand for payment in full within 24 hours. 24 hours. He didn't have 24 minutes. The judicial order that David had served him over his shrimp cocktail had done its job. The judge, seeing the blatant forgery, had signed the emergency injunction. At dawn, a cascade of automated holds locked down his life. The $600,000 my money. His escape fund was frozen. His offshore accounts were flagged and locked. Every credit card, every debit card, every line of credit in his name was now a dead piece of plastic. I gave the order. The apartment, leased in my name, was the next to fall. Since he had failed to pay rent for 3 months, I simply instructed my legal team to contact the building's management, declare the lease void due to non-payment, and authorize an immediate lockout. They must have spent the night in their car. Julian's surveillance team, a quiet man named Marcus, had tracked them. After the humiliation at the restaurant, they had apparently tried 2 different hotels. Their cards declined at both. At 12:30 p.m., they returned to the apartment building, on foot, looking disheveled and terrified. They were coming back for their passports, their last remaining hope of escape. I watched it all on a secure feed in the penthouse. I watched Leo, my husband, the man I had loved, use his fob on the lobby door. Access denied. He tried again, slamming it against the sensor. Red, red, red. Jenna, her face puffy from crying, began to scream at him. "What did you do? Leo, what did you do?" He buzzed the concierge. Frank, the guard who had refused me, was gone. Julian had made a single call to the building's owner, and Frank had been fired for negligence. The new concierge, polite and firm, informed Leo that he was not on the residents' list. They were trapped in the glass vestibule. Then, the final turn of the screw. The building's chief of security, flanked by 2 movers, opened the door, not to let them in, but to let them out. "Mr. Vance, Ms. Vance," the guard said, his voice captured by a parabolic mic. "You are trespassing. Your residency was terminated this morning. You have 5 minutes to collect your personal effects." "My clothes!" Jenna shrieked. "My bags!" The guard pointed. The movers had wheeled out a single, pathetic wardrobe rack, holding the few items that were demonstrably theirs. The rest, my furniture, my art, my life, was now sealed inside. As they were escorted onto the public sidewalk, the same sidewalk where I had shivered less than 48 hours before, Jenna completely unraveled. She was not made for the cold. "You ruined us," she screamed at Leo, right there on the pavement, as passers-by stopped to watch. "You said she was stupid. You said she was weak. You're the failure. Leo, you are nothing." She hit him, a wild, open-palmed slap. He just stood there, a hollow shell. My new phone buzzed. I looked down. Leo Vance, on the video feed. I could see him, his face a mask of desperate, pleading panic, holding his phone to his ear. I let it ring. Once, twice. Then I pressed decline. A text message immediately followed. "Maya, thank God, please. It was a mistake. It was Jenna. She pushed me. I never meant I'll give you everything. Please. I love you." I stared at the words, feeling nothing but the cold, hard satisfaction of a problem solved. I forwarded the message to David, my lawyer. A moment later, Leo's phone would chime. He would look down and see the automated reply I had instructed David to set up. "Your message has been received by counsel for Apex Holdings. Please direct all future correspondence to our legal team. Any direct personal contact with Ms. Sterling will be considered harassment and will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. We had taken his money. We had taken his home. We had taken his escape. The financial execution was, for all intents and purposes, complete. I thought we were moving into the cleanup phase, the long, boring part of the legal proceedings. I was wrong. The battle was over, but the war had just revealed a new, darker front. I was in the penthouse boardroom, now my permanent base of operations, reviewing the forensic accounting reports. It was 2 days after the restaurant. 2 days since Leo and Jenna had been spotted by Julian's team at a downtown homeless shelter. Rebecca, the analyst, highlighted a line item on the screen. "Ms. Sterling, this is an anomaly." I leaned in. "I thought we had everything." "We have all the debt," she clarified. "This is part of the spending. The $600,000 you transferred, we've traced 90% of it to the Cayman accounts, which are now frozen. But this is different. A series of payments, $50,000, once a month for the last 3 months, to a Dr. A. Eris, For consulting services. A consultant? I frowned. Leo's only consultant was Jenna. Exactly, Julian said from the head of the table. It's too clean. He was sloppy with everything else, moving money to his sister, but these payments were structured, invoiced, and paid on the first of the month. He was either genuinely paying a consultant, or this is a silent partner we don't know about. Find Dr. Eris, I said. I want to know who else was on his payroll. It took Julian's team less than an hour. Dr. Eris was not a shadowy figure. She was Dr. Elena Eris, a semi-retired, highly respected venture capitalist. She was Old Money Denver, a name that made even Julian raise an eyebrow. She's an investor, Julian mused, reading the profile. Leo must have been trying to scam her, and she was one of his clients. This payment is probably a kickback or a fee he was paying her to use her name. Or she's a victim, I said. Another one. There's only one way to find out. 3 hours later, Julian and I were sitting in the library of Dr. Eris's sprawling, historic Cherry Creek mansion. The room smelled of old books, lemon oil, and generational wealth. Dr. Eris, a woman in her late 60s with silver hair pulled into a tight chignon and eyes as sharp as obsidian chips, sat opposite us. She had not offered us a drink. Mr. Croft, Ms. Sterling, she said, her voice a dry rustle. I was told this was a matter of some urgency. Your message was dramatic. Dr. Eris, Julian began, all professional courtesy. We are here on a matter concerning a Mr. Leo Vance. We are in the process of a complex litigation against him. We've uncovered a financial relationship between him and your firm. Dr. Eris smiled. It was a cold, thin, reptilian action. Ah, Mr. Vance, the charming young man. Yes, I've been wondering when his little house of cards would come down. I'm surprised it took this long. I sat forward. Then you're a victim. He scammed you. She let out a dry laugh. My dear Ms. Sterling, men like Leo Vance do not scam women like me. They try, and I let them. I find it's the best way to gather data. Julian and I exchanged a look. This was not what we had expected. He approached me 6 months ago. Dr. Eris continued, tapping a slim pen on her desk. He had a charming pitch, a fake consulting firm, and one very valuable, very secret asset the hidden Sterling Eris. My blood ran cold. You knew? My dear, my due diligence team knew within 24 hours of him mentioning your name. It was fascinating. The plan he was proposing. He wasn't just after your trust, which he knew he couldn't crack. He was after you. What do you mean? He wanted an investor, she said. He was trying to get me to fund his data mining firm. And his pitch, his real pitch, was that he had successfully tamed and isolated the Sterling Eris and was in the final stages of a complete psychological takeover. He just needed bridge funding to manage the final acquisition. I couldn't breathe. This was the part Julian had theorized. This was the proof. I found him repulsive, Dr. Eris said, as if commenting on the weather, but also useful. I have a zero-tolerance policy for parasites. So, I did what I always do. I recorded everything. She pressed a button on her desk intercom. The meetings, Ms. Sterling. The celebratory phone calls he and his sister made from my lobby. She swiveled a small, discreet digital recorder on her desk. He was very proud of his plan to frame you. He thought it was brilliant. She pressed play. And there it was. Leo's voice. Not the voice I loved, but his real voice, tinny and sharp, full of arrogant spite. Just a few more weeks. His voice said, "She's completely broken, cries all the time. By the time I file, the judge will believe anything I say." Then, Jenna's voice, laughing, and the gambling thing. "Oh, that's perfect. Leo. Your Honor, she's an addict. She's crazy. She's the one who took the $2 million. It's foolproof. The recording clicked off. Dr. Eris looked at me, her black eyes assessing. He had a full plan to have you committed. Ms. Sterling, to use your grief for your parents against you, to paint you as a degenerate gambler. He and his sister were going to walk away with your money and leave you in a psychiatric facility. The $50,000 payments, that was me investing. Just enough to keep him talking, to give him enough rope. I was silent. The fury in my chest was so profound, so pure. It was almost holy. Dr. Eris leaned forward. He is a bug, Ms. Sterling, and I believe you and I share a similar desire to see him squashed. He took my time, and he tried to take your life. I find I am in possession of a great deal of evidence. Evidence that, I believe, you now have the infrastructure to use. Shall we? Leo and Jenna were ghosts. For 48 hours, they had disappeared from Julian's surveillance. They were, I knew, destitute. No money, no credit, no shelter. They were cornered animals, and cornered animals are always the most dangerous. They had one final, pathetic move left to make. The email didn't come to my new, secure phone. It came to the General Counsel's public inbox for Apex Holdings. It was a declaration of war, written by idiots. The subject was just my name, Maya. The body of the message was short, arrogant, and fatal. We know what you did. We have proof you faked the loans yourself. We have a video. Attached was a file, a 10-second clip. I watched it with Julian and Dr. Eris. It was my face, my old, softer face, from the apartment. I was crying. The audio was perfect. My voice, my exact cadence. I did it, the digital puppet of me said. I forged the loans, all 2 million of them. I have a gambling problem. Leo tried to stop me. He tried to help. It was a brilliant deep fake, technically sophisticated, legally terrifying. The email continued. $5 million. In cash. Or this video goes to the press and the FBI. We know you're the real criminal. Maya, and now everyone else will too. We'll be in touch. Dr. Eris, looking at the screen, simply sniffed. 5 million. They've insulted you. They should have asked for 20. They're not just trying to escape. Maya, Julian said, his eyes hard. They're trying to destroy you on their way out. This is a scorched earth policy. I know, I said, the cold clarity locking into place. They're desperate, and they're stupid, and they've just given us the one thing we didn't have. What's that? Julian asked. A confession, I said. They've admitted to extortion. Let's give them their meeting. Our lawyers replied. We agree to the terms. 10 a.m. tomorrow. The boardroom at Apex Holdings. The funds will be prepared. They arrived at 10 a.m. on the dot. They didn't look like power players. They looked like what they were, rats who had been sleeping in a car for 2 nights. Their clothes were crumpled, and their faces were greasy with fear and a new, desperate bravado. But when they walked into the main boardroom with its 30-foot wall of glass overlooking the city, their arrogance returned. They saw the opulence and thought they had won. Well, Leo said, trying for a smirk. He gestured at the vast room. Nice setup. Maya. Glad to see our money is being put to good use. Jenna sneered, her eyes scanning everything. Let's make this fast. We have a flight to catch. Where's the money? I was sitting at the head of the long, polished obsidian table. To my right sat Julian Croft, immaculate and silent. To my left, Dr. Elena Eris, who was observing them with the detached curiosity of a biologist. The money, Leo barked, his voice cracking a little. He was trying to sound in command. Now, 5 million. I looked at him, the man I had once loved. I felt nothing. No, that's not true. I felt a small, cold, satisfying click, like a lock finally engaging. Your video, I said, my voice calm and clear in the quiet room. It's very good. The forgery is impressive. I slid a single black tablet across the polished table. It glided silently, coming to a stop directly in front of Leo. The problem, I continued, is that while your deep fake is good, Dr. Eris's audio recordings are better. Leo's eyes widened. What? What the hell are you talking about? Who is this old? I tapped a control on my own tablet. The room's high-end speakers came to life, and Leo's own voice filled the air. Not his public voice, but the scheming, tinny voice he shared with his sister. Leo's voice crackled from the recording. A deep fake. It's brilliant. We'll say she confessed. We'll say she's a gambler. Jenna's voice, 5 million. Leo. We'll be set. She'll have to pay. It's the perfect blackmail. She's so stupid. I clicked off the recording. Leo stared at the tablet, his face a mask of waxy green-white terror. He finally understood. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a sentencing. You recorded us, Jenna shrieked, her voice a raw-throated scream. That's illegal. You bitch, you can't. No, dear, Dr. Eris said, her first time speaking. Her voice was like dry ice. I recorded you. You set yourselves up. There is a very important legal distinction. Leo's eyes darted to the door. He was a rat, and he'd just seen the trap snap shut. As if on cue, the heavy glass doors at the end of the boardroom slid open. It wasn't Julian's security. It was 2 detectives from the Denver Police Department and 2 agents in dark suits from the FBI's white-collar crime unit. They had been listening in a neighboring room the entire time. Leo Vance, Jenna Vance, one of the detectives said, his voice booming and official. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, identity theft, and extortion. Jenna didn't just cry. She collapsed, a full, theatrical, wailing meltdown on the $1,000-a-foot carpet, screaming. No, it was him. He made me do it. It was all Leo. Leo was silent. He just stood there, his shoulders slumped. He was empty. The agents cuffed him, and he didn't resist. His eyes found mine. He had finally, truly seen me. Not the wife. Not the victim. He saw the woman who had bought his debt, seized his life, and just recorded his confession to a federal crime. I stood up. I adjusted the lapel of my suit jacket. I watched them, one screaming, one silent, being led out of my boardroom in handcuffs. I walked past them, my heels clicking on the floor. I did not look back. I walked to the elevator, my reflection in the polished steel doors, a woman calm, cold, and in complete control. The doors opened, and I stepped in. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm curious, where are you all listening from today? Comment below. I'd love to connect and hear your thoughts on this. Please don't forget to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give us some extra support by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.